Hi, welcome back to the Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Miller. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. And today I wanted to talk about my garden. So the cold weather is moving in, and my garden is slowly getting cut back and cleaned out. And I'm a big gardener, and this is something that I think I started getting really into when I got sober. Um, and unfortunately, during the time that I lived in a house that had a big area to garden, that's when I was drinking and wasn't really paying a lot of attention to my garden. So now we live in a townhouse and we have no grass to mow, which is amazing. But I have this little square garden, and this is where I like to. It's kind of nice because it's small, so I can really tend to every little nook and cranny of the garden. But this morning I was in a sobriety meeting, and in the reading that we had, it was talking about comparing a rose bush to sobriety. And I thought, this is such a pleasant thing to think about, especially because I'm having to start discarding the waste of my garden, the stuff that's dying. And so I wanted to talk about what my garden looks like when it's vibrant and how I think about this in comparison to my recovery and nurturing the garden and the journey of sobriety and stroke recovery, and how it's very similar. So just bear with me if you're interested. It's kind of just a nice time to think about the garden before it gets nice and cold outside. So, one of the things that I learned or that I heard right in the beginning of entering sobriety was that when we start going to meetings and we're not exactly ready to get sober, it's still important that we keep coming back because it plants those seeds in us. And if we can keep coming back and keep having those seeds planted, then they can possibly grow into something. But it needs to have a lot of patience, a lot of dedication, and just a lot of nurturing to tend to those seeds in order to have it grow into something that's really meaningful and beneficial in our lives, to save our lives, quite honestly. So I wanted to talk a little more in detail about this analogy. So in um, in recovery for sobriety, when I first came in, I was not ready to get sober. I actually I was working at home, so I would leave to go to like a lunchtime meeting and listen. I'd sit there for an hour. I'd listen to other people's shares. I didn't really have much to say. I had already been drinking before I even showed up. And then on the way home, I would stop at 7-Eleven and get more alcohol. But even though that was happening, I was still having these seeds planted. And it wasn't until I finally, got to my low and started to embrace the idea that I needed to get sober. And in the same way, um, when I started to embrace the idea that this stroke, the symptoms are not going to change. Nothing's going to change unless I change. So I needed to start sowing the seeds of change, you see? And so each seed I envision symbolizes hope, resilience, and the potential for growth. And when I nurture the seeds, they will begin to sprout and grow, just like my recovery. So much like caring for little seedlings, I have to provide consistent care to my sobriety and my stroke rehabilitation. Now, when I say rehabilitation, I honestly don't even know what that looks like right now because I'm still trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I have the neuro ophthalmologist appointment in 2 days. I'm totally nervous about it. But anyway, it's that kind of consistent attention that I am giving myself that is what's caring for these seedlings. And when I'm going to my support groups and I'm going to therapy, which I've been in and out of vision therapy, and I'm doing all of these self-care practices, this is just like watering the seeds in the garden. And stroke recovery requires this unwavering commitment to therapies and for me, restricting using my eyes. And man, it's been a tough week because interestingly enough, decorating my tree has been extremely painful for my head. So it's taken me a week to put the ornaments on the tree. And but I'm done now. All we have left is the bow. I usually put a big red bow on top. So I just have to put the bow on top. But I need a spotter. And today I didn't feel well enough to climb the ladder. So we're going to do that tomorrow. So just like, well, before I get into the analogy of storms coming to the garden, I wanted to mention some of the flowers that I have growing in my garden. And for any of you gardeners who actually know what the names of your plants are, I'm going to drive you crazy right now because I'm not quite sure what the names of my plants are. But I just know how to tend to them, really. So this will drive you crazy right now. So sorry in advance. But so I might be getting these wrong. But some of the plants that I have in my garden are, I have my favorite thing. Well, it's hard to have a favorite, but one of my favorite things that my mom gave me is elephant ears. And this year was the first time I had elephant ears. And they required a shit ton of water. And then some of the plants, I think I actually watered too much. So I'm learning a little bit more about which ones require a lot of water and which ones don't. But the elephant ears definitely needed a lot of water. And then I have something that I think is called a rose companion. These are the ones that have fuzzy stems, and then they have these really, really bright flowers that just kind of pop out of the ends of them. And these seem to be like super robust, and I water them a lot. They seem to do great. If they get too tall, they break. Actually, they just lose their sturdiness and just topple over. I also have these. The new this year, I have what I think is called fuchsias, and they are little bells that are pink on the outside, and there's like a little purple inside that hangs down with little antenna things. Anyway, these are so pretty. I just had a tiny little plant of those, but for some reason, it didn't matter what I did. Like, they did not like my garden. I think maybe they didn't like all the sun. Maybe they needed less sun. But I tried to water them like a ton, and they kept being there, but I could tell they weren't totally happy like they were when I bought them. I do have a point when I'm done here, I promise. And then I have hostas. So my hostas, along with some of my other plants, I took them from my house in Charlestown. So the things that I did get growing out in Charlestown, I took pieces of them so that I could have a piece of Charlestown here at this house. So I have hostas. I have these little, I think they might be called lily of the valley. I'm not sure, but they're little tiny bells that hang off, little tiny white bells, and they're so delicate and pretty. But the deer, I think it's either deer or fox, come by, I think it's deer, and eat them every year. I've been here for 3 years. Something comes by and just nibbles all the little bells away. They're not like they haven't dropped off and they're laying on the ground or anything. They're just gone. One day I come out in the morning and all the little bells are missing, and I'm like, you stinker, whatever it is that's coming and eating my little bells. Um, but those are doing really well and growing more and more each year, even though my bells disappear. Um, I also have, let's see, I have this one plant that's like, it's one root, and then it spreads. So this one root has all of these branches off of it that spread across the ground, and then there's these little uh, pinkish purple flowers that pop out all over the garden. So it kind of spreads across the whole garden. It doesn't smother anything because it's only got one root. And the little flowers like pop up in between all of my other flowers, and they're like little teacups. They're very, very delicate and cute. And then I've got this other plant that is like it's just like a ground covering. It's like leaves that have white and green. And this will spread so much that it smothers my other stuff. So I have to really I have to be hands-on very much and pick that out before it smothers my other flowers and before it goes under the ground and pops up in my in my neighbor's garden. But I wanted to talk about some of these flowers because it's a great example about how each one of them grows in its own way. Each one of them requires a different amount of sun, a different amount of water. Each one requires a different amount of attention. Some of them I'll go out and need to tend to every day. And then there's others that would be fine if I didn't touch them for weeks. And you can look at this in a lot of different ways. One is that there's certain assets within me, there's certain characteristics within me that really thrive on their own. I don't really have to tend to them very much. There's this quality I have about being an overachiever. It's something that just happens. I don't work very hard to be an overachiever. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron, but it's not something that I have to practice. It just happens. I'm just always doing more than I should. And so that's something that in my garden will just grow on its own. And then there's this other thing, my fears. And those fears, I don't necessarily get fearful every day, but at least once a week, I probably have some anxiety and fear that starts bubbling up for some reason or another. And it's something that I have to stop and tend to. I have to pay attention to it. I have to pick the weeds around it. I have to figure out what it is that's that's making it grow? What can I do to control it in such a way that I don't want to get rid of the fear. I don't want to get rid of the anxiety, meaning, yeah, I'm on medication for anxiety, but I don't want to take so much that I don't feel it because I still need to be a human being. And anxiety and fear are actually very helpful in how we make decisions. We base those a lot of times on fear and anxiety. Um, and so these are just two examples of how there's just qualities within me that I have to pay attention to on entirely different levels every day. So it's very much the same for me in sobriety and stroke recovery. There are some things that I have to do every day. I have to go to my sobriety meeting every morning at 7 a.m. If I don't go, then I'm going to be wilting all day long, for sure. It's just not the same if I don't start my day out with a morning meeting. And there are some flowers in my garden that are so much happier if I wake up, when I get up and let my dogs out at 6:30 in the morning, if I get the hose out and water them bright and early in the morning before the hot sun starts hitting them. You know what I mean? I mean, that's exactly what it's like for me to wake up in the morning and water myself with my sobriety meeting so that when the sun starts scorching me, when I'm dealing with people, places, and things, I'm already, I have stored up what I need in order to handle what's in front of me for the day. So I just really appreciated this analogy as I was thinking about it. And then there's this idea of storms. So this is interesting because right before it started getting cold, we were getting a ton of rain. And so I stopped watering my plants because we were getting so much rain. And when I was walking by and, admiring my garden, that's what I do. I walk by. Sometimes I'll kind of tiptoe a little bit in between the flowers so I can get a closer look at one of them. And so one day I was kind of going in to get a closer look, and it had just like poured down rain. I mean, pouring down rain. And I thought, I'm looking at this plant and it just looked like the storm, like, like, destroyed it almost. Maybe not destroyed it, but like it wasn't happy that it just got, uh, you know, just dumped on by this storm because it was really coming down. And I thought, oh, I hope it didn't damage it. Well, when the next day, it was just so alive and blooming. So the leaves and the flowers and everything were all weighed down by all the water that was laying on top of it. But it wasn't too much for the roots to get what they needed from it. And so my recovery is similar to that. I think that the storms, they feel the storms in my life, the things that are happening, all of this stroke stuff, having to deal with insurance and stuff, it feels like it's unbearable. It feels like it's weighing me down, and it's testing my resilience and my commitment to self-care. And in sobriety, those are the times that if we don't have a strong foundation and I'm not spiritually fit by going to my meetings and talking to my sponsor and stuff, then I might be more tempted or might have more triggers that would arise. And so that's the importance of making sure that I have that foundation there. But just like that in stroke recovery, I have setbacks. I have a lot of setbacks this week, for one. I was all excited to decorate for Christmas, and it turns out, hey, guess what? Decorating the tree makes you feel like shit, and that sucks because one of the days I turned the lights off on the tree and thought that might be more helpful to not have the bright lights in my eyes. But it's kind of hard to decorate the tree without the lights on. I mean, that's part of the fun. So, what I ended up doing was I would decorate for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, and then I would stop for, I don't know, I'd do that was about it for the morning, and then I do it again in the afternoon. Um, so those are challenges that make me feel like I'm not progressing. I don't feel like I'm progressing at all, if I'm being honest. Um, at all. I think the only thing that has felt like progress is when I started getting migraine injections. So, but just like the flowers in the garden that I saw just way down and seemed like they weren't even gonna like get lighter and bloom again, they just bounced back. The next time I looked at them, the next day they had just completely bounced back. And so I can too. I can persevere through these kinds of difficulties as well. And the garden provides me a good image of that. So, finally, as the flowers bloom in the garden, I think that our recoveries will also bloom with time. My garden, when I first moved in here, was um, whoever lived here before had these big, gigantic bushes, and they were growing into each other, and they were so big that they were growing into the driveway so that if you pulled your car in, it would scratch the side of your car, which I didn't do. But so I cut back the bushes to the point that they're just these adorable tiny little bushes. One of them I cut into like a little bush. And then the other one, I took all the branches off except for two of them, and it looks like a tree. It was a bush, but it looks like a tree now, and it's pretty adorable if I don't say so myself. And but that was all that was in the garden. That was it. And over time, over the past 3 years, I've been planting. When I first moved in, I planted the hostas. I planted these other couple things that I had. Um, and you know, they they grew, but like the hostas were seedlings from my Charlestown house. So they were super small the first year. And then the second year they got a little bigger. And this year I was like, I have three of them, and I thought, maybe my garden is only big enough for two of them now. So the more, the longer I'm consistent with the garden, the more full it's becoming. And the happier and more beautiful all of the different plants are in the garden. And that's what I imagine it's going to be like. That's what it's been like for my sobriety. So, it's given me the longer that I take care of my sobriety, the more clarity I have about my life, the more clarity I have about um, my my children, being a parent, and my relationships, and just having this inner peace that just exists and kind of holds me all the time. And similarly in stroke recovery, um, it's only been, yes, it's been 2.5 years since my stroke, but it's been only 6 months since I have stopped prioritizing work and starting to prioritize my health. And I am finding new strength in myself. Um, I was interviewed by another podcast, Stronger After Stroke. Some of you may have heard it. And at the very end, I started crying because he asked me something about what did you learn about yourself so far? And I said that I really am strong. And he said, you didn't know that about yourself after everything that you've done so far? And I was like, no, I have to be reminded, and that's why I'm here doing this podcast, because I have to remind myself every freaking day that I am strong and that I can continue to do this. If I don't show up and do this self-talk, um, I'm gonna get, it's like I'm not watering my garden. That's what it feels like. So, I think, you know, I have hope. I have hope that there is some kind of solution for my head pain. We haven't found it yet. I started a new medication on November 14th, but I've been experiencing some side effects. Uh, so I'm stopping it today, actually. So I didn't have any additional headache relief. So far only the migraine injections have gotten rid of most of the sharp pains in my head, but I still have the underlying headache, and it's been pretty bad this week. But I have hope that they will figure something out. I mean, if I don't have hope, what do I have? I have a headache, you know? And I the more that I'm taking the time for myself in stroke recovery, the deeper my appreciation is for life. And I've talked about I've I've had a lot of fear after my stroke. And it's not gone. Am I going to have another stroke? I don't know. The more I research, the more I see, these people who have had multiple strokes. So, I don't know what's ahead of me, but I do know that I'm sober so that I can appreciate the life that I have right now. If I wasn't sober right now, who knows where I would be. I certainly wouldn't be doing this podcast, that's for sure. So as we continue to recover, think of it as your garden, and it's not about just seeing what your garden looks like when everything's in high bloom. It's about what it looks like at the beginning in the spring and getting it all cleaned up and seeing those little bits of new life that are starting to grow. That's just as beautiful as when everything is in full bloom. And as everything kind of comes to a close this fall and as we move into the winter, there's another beauty that's in that. And I'm, I'm, I don't want to say fearful, but I'm slightly concerned about what it's like to be in this type of situation, this situation where I've got a lot of head pain. I'm kind of stuck in the house constantly. And outside, the leaves are all falling off. The grass is starting to turn a little, everything's going into hibernation. What is that going to feel like? Um, what is that going to feel like? Because when I look at my garden and I'm starting to clean it up, it's looking very bare. it's looking like, what do I put there for the winter? You know, and I need to figure that out. And I'm sure that there is some kind of beauty there. I have to figure out what that is, because I don't want to enter this new season with any expectation that I'm going to sink into some kind of depression or something, which is very normal um, during the winter. So I'm not doing my job if I don't talk about my concerns and my fears about these different stages of my recovery. But I will continue to nurture myself with patience. I will continue to be kind to myself and persevere. And hopefully, I will see something blooming. Maybe we'll find some other analogy for it when it starts getting super cold outside. But um, but I do feel hopeful that continuing to talk about everything that I'm going through publicly is the absolute best answer for me. And not only am I trying to talk about it publicly through my podcast, I've been reaching out to other public channels and forums to talk about my story, because the more I can talk about it, the stronger my recovery is, and the more powerful I think my recovery is in reaching other people and helping other people so that we can heal together. I think there's so much healing when we do it together. So thank you for tuning in to the Recovery Daily podcast. I hope you enjoyed our enriching garden analogy today. And find me on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. Or you can email me at rachel@recoverydailypodcast.com. And I will talk to you tomorrow.